Welcome.
Good afternoon. You may or may not remember me. We talked virtually about a year ago, and I had an opportunity to speak a little bit longer with some of you. But we've been talking about how to do a better job of getting more work out the door faster for quite some time. And this referendum really lit a fire under the need to do that. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm excited because I've been managing programs for over 20 years, all different sorts of large capital programs, and your staff is so energized. They're welcoming a change because it takes a culture change to get a program like this done in 10 years. You guys did the heavy lifting, providing the funding and helping to get the support from the residents in the referendum. So today I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about what is the implementation plan. You asked us to come up with an acquisition plan. I call it an implementation plan because quite honestly, when I think acquisition, I think of property, real estate and stuff. So it's a lot more than just figuring out how we're going to get projects done. It's like, how are we going to implement this from start to finish? So I'm going to show you a little bit of the sausage making, the process that we've been going through. And then I'm going to present that plan to you today, what we're recommending to get this flood protection program done in the 10-year window. Let me see if I am going to be technology savvy. So it all starts with a vision. And I'm not going to go through this entire thing, but the vision is more than just getting projects done. The vision is changing your neighborhoods. The vision is changing the flooding. The vision is changing how we do projects, how we are efficient from engineering through planning through construction. So it's a big vision, and it's about transparency. That's one of the things we heard from staff as well as you, that you would like to see more transparency in how projects are implemented over time and the progress on that. So this is all about where do we want to be? What does success look like for the program? Like I said, it's just not about completing 21 projects. It's about changing, the city and changing how we move forward with doing capital program. So phase 1 of the FPP, Flood Protection Program, is, like I said, it's really more than the 21 projects. This is the map that's on the website right now, and these are the projects that are going to be completed within the 10-year window. So we're already in there. We're already going. So let's talk about how do we get to that plan. As LJ said, we've been meeting since September, really, to talk about how can we do things better? How can we get projects out the door better defined? Assuming money wasn't an issue, how would you do it differently? And also training your staff on how other places are doing it differently, how we're able to get some more efficiencies on other programs. So I'm going to walk you through each one of these. We've set up a governance team, and that includes all the folks LJ thanked today for their support. The city manager's office, OPA, budget, finance, everyone who touches anything to do with the flood protection program is on that leadership team that helps to make the decisions and provide direction to the staff level. We've also set up some working groups with staff, the people, the butts in the seats, the people doing the work, the project managers, the planners, the people getting those properties acquired that you need. We've met with them and said, what processes drive you crazy? What processes do you not understand? What's not clear? How can we do a better job of communicating? And we've come up with some really exciting ideas. We've done it at the grassroots level, and we're bringing those up to that governance team so that they can bless that or, say, we got enough to do without doing that one right now. So we've done a lot of things just as strategy. And this interdepartment coordination has been critical because it's not just your engineering folks or just public works folks that's going to implement this program. You got to have the money from budget. You got to have finances. You got to have the bond in place. You got to have the real estate, the property acquired when it's time to build that or design it. You got to have construction coordination with utilities already going on. So we've identified everyone who touches this program and how we can work with them and they can work with the program. When I say program, I mean the flood protection program. How they can all work together and be a lot more effective than maybe we've been in the past. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the details. Councilmember Moss said he likes to read things at night. I did provide a pretty good white paper a couple weeks ago.
I read that.
So thank you very much for reading it. I appreciate that. But if you really want to know a lot more details, it's going to be in this white paper. And we'll also be publishing a phase 1 program assessment report in a few more months. It's going to be a little more detailed than this white paper. So get all those annual reports out the door so you got time to read my next report. Every large capital program, no matter what you do, you have risks that you have to deal with, and you have to recognize them up front and mitigate them as you go And if you don't, that's when you come into bottlenecks that stop projects. That's when you come into situations that you didn't foresee and you didn't plan for. So we went through with the governance team and with staff, and we talked about risks that were technical. Those are kind of the ones everybody focuses on. You always know that the engineers always know what the technical risks are, and they have ideas for mitigating them. But you don't always think about what are the legal risks. You know, we could have bid disputes. We could have bid protests. We could have people upset about change orders. We could have all kinds of things from the legal department that we want to get them on board early on. How do we handle this if it happens? How do we prevent it from happening to the greatest extent possible? Then how do we mitigate it so it doesn't slow the program down? Stuff's going to happen. You know that. You hear that every week when you have these meetings. Something happens. We didn't get envelopes for real estate. Something happens, but how do you mitigate it? How do you keep moving forward even in the face of all those challenges? It's really about risk management and what that's about. Talking fast today. So we went, and I do that by my nature. So the activities that we did is we developed the governance team for leadership across all the interdepartments. We developed working groups at the staff level to talk about process improvements and enhancements. We did a risk register. We figured out what are the risks that could affect this program from being completed on time and in 10 years. And then we asked our questions, how are we going to do this program? Are we going to deliver this as one giant project, like many folks do in different federal projects? Are we going to deliver this in 50 separate projects, which would drive everybody insane and nobody would want to do that? What is the best way to deliver the program? And it's complicated. I hate using that answer because I always think of lawyers, no offense. They always say it depends, you know, but it's kind of complicated when you figure out how you're going to deliver a program. But we looked at 4 different ways. Traditionally, these types of projects have been designed, then you go bid them for construction, and then you go build it. We call that design, bid, build. Real creative. You know, engineers aren't known for their creativity. But we've done that traditionally, and it works well. But there are opportunities for us to get more efficient today. There's a lot more methods that are out there, and design build is one where you hire a team up front, they design it together, and they start building it together. So I was not a real believer of design build about 10 years ago when I was working for a utility. I thought, you're just trying to take my authority away. You're just trying to, I want to make the decisions. And we're going to show you that that's still, you can still have that with the design build program. It all depends on the model that you use. So the good news is, after having been on several design build projects, I understand how it works now. And I really am an advocate for some of your projects, not for all of your projects. And we're going to talk about why. So there's 2 different types of design build. There's a lump sum design build where you hire one person, one team, go get all this done, give me the keys when you're finished. And there's some advantages and disadvantages to that, as there are with everything else. The main advantages are you got one person doing everything. You can wash your hands of it, but you know that really never works too well in reality. Things happen that are going to prevent that from always being the best answer. You don't get a lot of collaboration. And your staff are very engaged in these projects. They have done the planning. They have been doing design on some of them. So it's not like we just have a big unknown. We just know what we want it to look like at the end. A lot of these projects are underway already. So it's not a good time to transition them to someone else. So the biggest downside of the lump sum kind of single prime contractor is a couple things. The biggest challenges, in my opinion, are that your projects are at so many different stages, it doesn't make sense. You already have engineers of record for many projects. And this isn't going to solve, it's not going to be that panacea that we had, you'd often hoped. And this is, like I said, you hire one person right at the beginning and you see them later. But there's another delivery model called progressive design build. And that's a little bit different. With lump sum, you get the total price of the project with the bid. So we go out there and say, we want you to go out there, build these projects, give me the price, go do it. With progressive design build, we say we want you to go out there, build these projects, but then we work with them. Instead of giving them like a 30% design to give you a cost off of, which has a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty, and you're going to pay for that in risk and price. They're not, they're in the business to make money, so they got to cover their risk, and they do that with price. So we want to get rid of some of that uncertainty and risk. And so we work with them and we come up with a more robust design. So it's not a 30% conceptual design, it's more like a 60, 70% design. And then they can do a lot better takeoff. You know a lot better when you know exactly where that pipe's going, not when you kind of have a general idea of what neighborhood it's going through. When you know what kind of how deep it has to go, what type of conflicts you have to deal with, you can get a lot better price, and that reduces the uncertainty. You get a better price. And with this delivery model, the savings that you get from your initial estimate are split between the owner and the contractor. So it's all transparent. I like it because you can see the cost of everything. Nothing's hidden. It's called open book pricing. So when they give you what's called the guaranteed maximum price, which doesn't happen until like the 60-70% design phase, you know how much every piece of pipe costs. You know where all those costs are. And you can say, you know what, no, that's more than we wanted to spend. We need to change the scope of this project. Let's change out this material, or let's not build this phase right now. You can have a decision point to reduce your price if you need to at that point. We're all concerned about price. Like the speaker before me said, you know, it's crazy right now. You can't price concrete pipe. You don't know if it's going to be there. Some of these pump stations that we're building are custom. They're huge. Those are going to have long lead times to get the pumps and the motors that are going to serve those stations. And that uncertainty right now, how long will it take? We don't know. So, I mean, that's kind of something that we're all living through as we go through this program. So I've talked a little about this. So we didn't just flip a coin. We kind of came up with a logical progression. Which projects should we stay traditional design bid build, the way we've been doing it, and which projects should we try this other approach, where we're going to hire the designer and the engineer together with the contractor and say, go do it with us. So if the project has already progressed beyond a 60% design, it doesn't make sense to hire a design builder because you've already designed it. You know, you really just need a builder at that point. If the project's kind of vertical construction, meaning it's more above ground, less just piping based, more like a pump station, tide gates, those kind of structure projects, those are pretty conducive to design build teams. You get a lot of contractors bidding on that type of work. And if there's a grouping of projects that are hydraulically connected, meaning the Princess Anne Plaza, the Windsor Woods, the lakes, all those communities are connected hydraulically with the stormwater system, it makes sense to put those projects together instead of having one person build this piece that's going to connect to somebody else's piece that's going to connect. So those are the kind of projects we lump together in a bundle and recommending like a design build approach for those projects. It made a lot of sense to do it that way. So that's I've kind of thrown a lot of stuff at you, but that's kind of the process that we've been going through since September and accelerated obviously since November with staff to figure out how can we make this work. So now I want to show you, after all that grinding, here's what came out as far as the plan. Now, you take a look at this. These are all the phase 1 projects, and there's quite a few listed here. But I want to show you the columns. That first column, you already have projects under construction. Your staff has not stopped moving until we got this worked out. You know, they have been keeping things moving forward. You can see that second column, we've gotten bids on the Windsor Woods Tide Gate, Lake Bradford dredging, some other the stormwater piping in Windsor Woods. So those are going to go to construction very soon. And then you have quite a few that are being designed. And then that sweet spot are the ones that have finished planning. So we know what we want, but nobody's designed it yet. So those are kind of like, let's see if we can bundle those all together and get economies of scale to getting one team to do it. So in the blue, I'm really pushing it, trying to find this a little. Oh, it worked. In this blue color, this are the projects that we feel like would be a good design build candidate. And some of them are bundled together. But we also thought some of these projects, like these pump stations on Eastern Shore Drive, you have a couple pump stations that work in tandem together hydraulically. You're already designing them. One's at 90, one's at 60, so you don't need to design and build them. But let's bundle them together. Let's build them together. They're in the same system, so we're going to put them in one contract. It'll be a design bid build, so we're going to have one contractor do both stations. So we looked at things like that. It made a lot of sense. They're just down the street from each other. Why have two separate bids when you can put them together? Those are the kind of logic progression that we've come for. But we do have a group of projects here that haven't really, they need more planning. They're not well enough defined. Or things have happened, like in Central Resort District. Tony Utterback's been telling you about that for a while. Different things have happened since the last planning report. So we need to revisit it, update it, before we really decide what to do. So those are we're still proposing a design build for those grouping of projects because they're connected, but a little bit later, which is good because we need to span some things out. I don't expect you to read us from where you're at from here. I want you to focus on the bars. So these are all the projects listed, and then these are the 10-year window. And you can see everything that's kind of like a yellow is a procurement. You're either procuring an engineer, a professional service, or you're procuring a contractor. And you can see this year we're pretty busy. We're getting a lot of procurements done so that we can keep this project done in 10 years. This is a pretty aggressive window. And we need, these projects take a bit of time to construct, especially the pump stations. You know, that's not something you can build in a year. You know, you need at least 3 years to get all that stuff done and all the components. So in order to accommodate these longer construction periods, we need to figure out what we're doing. Are we going to go design it right now, or are we going to go hire a design builder that we're going to work with? So we've done that for each one of these projects. We've identified what we believe is the right approach, how to advance those projects. And we also want to phase them out a little bit. You don't want to have design builder, large firms competing for 3 contracts in the same year, because they're got other people have infrastructure projects around here too. And there are others going to happen with this new infrastructure funding. So we want to make sure that we're having a steady program implementation. So we're not doing all 3 packages the same year. We're phasing them up a little bit so that we can have better competition and other folks have better variety for when we're getting them. Because the market's going to get pretty congested pretty soon as people are they can pick and choose what jobs they want to bid on now. Once the infrastructure funding comes, they have to have those projects done within 6 years. So most of them are going to be pretty close to shovel ready. So you're going to have some competition. The city's going to be competing for contractors, as is every other utility in city in the country. But we're going to have, really attractive packages that say, yeah, that's the project I want to work on. So I can go through each one of these if that's what you want me to do today. I figured it's getting long, but you have this presentation, and I'd be happy to meet with you offline or through the city manager's office or with LJ to talk more detail. But we really have already grouped all these projects together, and the presentation kind of shows you which projects we're thinking would be good design build, which ones let's just keep going. They're already moving forward. Let's go and blow. We're working on some of those projects to acquire the real estate that's needed earlier. So that's one of the process improvements that we came up with staff, working with engineering, stormwater, and real estate. We were waiting too long because people wanted to be certain. But then if you wait too long, then you're delaying your design and all those sorts of things. So there were some enhancements, but we're still doing for other projects we're going. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just show you flipping through there, because I know you've had a long day and there's a lot I'm throwing out there at you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Who knew that stormwater could be so exciting?
Stormwater is very exciting. It's going to be even more exciting when we're done.
Yeah, the most incredible presentation that looked like this was the most exciting thing happening.
It is.
And
You just
you did just an absolutely fantastic job. And
Thank you.
with our citizens behind this, the way they've been, it needs to be exciting. So I cannot compliment you enough.
Thank you.
Mr. Rouse has a question.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. And I echo the same sentiments. You made it very exciting and enjoyable throughout this presentation. My question is on page or slide 15, the status of current FPP projects, where you have the design build bundles.
Yep.
Down there in the blue. You have Lake Bradford, Chubb Lake Pump Station, Outfall, Windsor Woods, flood barriers, Windsor Woods Pump Station, Windsor Woods, Thalia Creek, Lake Trashmore channels and culverts, the lake flood barriers, the Lake South London Bridge, creek channels and gate, the Lakes Highland Road gate, and
We're actually proposing
on.
3 separate design build bundles.
okay.
One of them would be almost everything in this Windsor Woods, Princess Anne Plaza, and the lakes.
Right.
So all those projects, excluding the Windsor Woods Tide Gate, which you've already received bids on,
Right.
are going to be one contract,
Right.
design build. So Lake Bradford is a big project.
Mhm.
It's like 80 million plus.
Sure.
So that would be a good, and you haven't started it, so that would be a good separate design build
Okay.
project. And then the Central Resort District.
What's
Right.
the question?
So my question was, for those, obviously you said 3 separate design build
Yeah.
contracts. The timetables, if they have a large contract and they have pump station and gates, are the timetables still the same if it takes 3 years to build a pump station and then a flood gate? Are those timetables still within the 10 years parameters or 6 years? And And when you have procurement, are those people bidding on it, are they able to, or making sure that they're certified to be able to do that amount of work in such a condensed amount of time? And what steps are we making sure to ensure the quality of that work?
Okay.
And I'm sorry, that's
No, I think I got all three of them, but if I miss one, just ask
There.
me again. But yes, for all of it. No, just kidding.
I just love your personality.
No, yes, we've accommodated. You get a lot of economies of scale. This Windsor Woods, the plaza, Princess Anne Plaza, and the lakes, we have at least 2 pump stations in there, 3 tide gates, and 3 different flood barrier projects. So having the same firm do those, they can do them at the same time, so they're saving time. So we won't have a really good schedule until we get farther along and we get to that guaranteed maximum price phase. But yeah, we have confident that the schedules we put in there are reasonable for that type of work. But we think they'll be shorter once we get people who do this every day and build it and can figure out, oh, I want to do this instead of that, and do this first, do that first. I don't build stuff. I plan, design stuff.
I think it helps clarify when the public is listening, just to, we're talking about doing these projects within a 10-year window.
Yeah.
And if it takes 3 years to build a pump station
Yeah.
here, another 3 years to do a gate here, that we're not, we're still condensing
That's
the
right.
timeline, but doing the work within that timeline and not pushing it out to 15, 20
And we can't go to construction on some of those big projects until we get the permits. So, one of the process improvements is to streamline the permit process. LJ.
I just wanted to offer one comment for you, Councilman. One of the nice things about this bundle concept is the contractor, they're going to bid that guaranteed maximum price. They know how much money they're going to get. Their desire then is to make it as short a time as they can. The longer they draw it out, the more payroll they have to pay, the more contingencies they have to pay, the more risk, insurance, all of those costs take more out of their bottom line. So their desire, by doing what we're doing and looking at these conjoined systems, that brings their impetus to get the project done. They want to get it done because that's how they make their money.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Branch, then Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Mayor. LJ, I might have you up there still. And I like the way you guys have approached this. It makes a lot of sense to me, and I do like your enthusiasm too. But there's a lot that's been dumped on your department now with this referendum and all these projects, and I guess my question is, the normal maintenance operations that you would usually perform, are you going to be able to do all of that as well?
So one of the things that I hope that you took away from this is that this is the flood protection program, and you saw a lot of existing CIP projects that were included in the previous CIP are getting melded into this. This is the flood protection program, and it's being administered by the Stormwater Engineering Center. From a maintenance standpoint, and Alicia will be able to echo everything I'm saying. Every time we have a conversation about this, my conversation always goes back to, what about maintenance? How does this help our maintenance program? One of the things that I have been adamant about, and they're probably sick of me saying this, is how do we make sure that we don't build 3 different types of pump stations so that the parts are not interchangeable? So we're looking at maintenance all the time in what we're doing. On top of which, we have another division in Public Works that handles maintenance. And we're working with them. They are part of this process, but we're also working with them on their priorities and where we're going with them. So it is not taking their time away to do this. Although they're participants, they're not the prime drivers.
And adding to what LJ said, he has preached maintenance all the time, which is great. But, even when we get ready to go into some of these projects, we're going to see, are there prep work that we need to add into the project? We're already doing Lake Bradford dredging as a separate project. But if you weren't, and you were going to go do that pump station outfall, you would need to have the lake dredged. So some of that pre-thought's already been happening, but we're going to continue that even to a more microscopic level, not microscopic, but lower level, not just the big lakes, but are there corridors where we need to be doing maintenance while we're out there? So.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Mr. Moss, Mr. Bellucci.
Got a couple observations and a couple questions. First, I think somewhere in this presentation, maybe it's in the slide, we need to integrate the Citizen Flood Prevention Bond Referendum Oversight Committee to show where they play and where they come into effect. That would be, number one, would be a good idea. Another observation, because I get lots of questions on this on email and on Facebook, is when when we have taken projects that are in the CIP and that were already programmed, we moved them into this program, and then there's the net new money that brings it to completion. So I don't know what color coding we need to have, but people somehow think that that other money isn't still being used and that the bond referendum doesn't need that money to get the project to completion. So however we can color code that and communicate that it's taking,
Okay.
a big project was partially funded, the bond referendum got it to completion, so to speak. So I think that's important. I think somewhere, are we gonna be having someone when people are doing, like you said, all of Windsor Woods, the lakes is a system of systems, is someone gonna be independently doing the OT&E, operational test and action, at the end to show that while all the systems passed, when you take the systems of system, does the holistic system really perform? Is that gonna be done by someone independent?
Yep, each one of those design build packages has an owner's rep, and that's an engineering firm who would be responsible for verifying all that stuff.
And they'll be bonded?
Yep.
Well, that's really good. I think the other thing you talked about, workforce availability, I think we're already, as you probably know, I know you're aware of this on some other projects, that's an issue. I worked a big project in another state where they actually brought in people from St. Louis and Michigan to work on their project. That's how the trade scales. So I think that is important to figure out. The bigger the project, what's possible, the better it is for him to retain or her to retain trades.
Yeah.
This does match up with our conversation we had, seems like now forever ago, for about an hour and a half with Mr. Dehaney. So I am very pleased that this is away from the project-by-project approach. But when they have the trade decisions, you talked about scope and cost. Well, what we can't trade off is the performance the system was going to deliver, or the overall standard can't be met. So I'm counting on you, LJ. You're the person that's the police officer on that, the sheriff, to make sure that we're never trading off the performance of the system. I think that's important. I think that's an important point to emphasize in your configuration management or whatever to the public, that we're not going to be trading away. I think when we get to that point, I think you have to come back and tell us that because of other cost factors or whatever's happened, our money didn't go as far as we wanted it to go. And I'm just saying that because that could happen. But I'd much prefer to know that than to downsize my performance and not deliver the outcome that we told the public we would deliver. And so I think that is key. So is Jacob Engineering going to be a part of your quality assurance team?
Yes, sir. So they're doing program development with us, and Jacobs is also augmenting us in a number of areas where we either don't have the staff or we don't have the capability. So they're our partners. I don't have a better way to describe it than that.
I like that.
They're our
That's a good
partners
teaming
through
approach. I
and
like
through.
Because if they know how you got here, they're in the best position to know how well the execution is going. And so I know we talked about this before, but I'm sure that when we go to these, I guess we're going to have industry days, you're going to have qualified bidders, is what you're going to do on this thing. I think it's important on all those little steps. It might not sound significant, but to strategically communicate, we cannot over-communicate our physical progress on this task.
And I think we have an industry day coming up in 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Mr. Dehaney?
and there's another portion of this presentation that Leisha's going to talk about, the communications plan for this, and that's some of those things that Mr. Moss is talking about is included in that.
If I may say one thing, I mentioned that Jacobs is our partner. One thing that's very important to know, Jacobs will not be doing design work. They have no conflicts whatsoever in that role. They are purely from the program administration part of it.
I figured as much, and when you're with involvement, when Mr. Jones and I were on that regular, I was impressed by both your and your team's knowledge and insight about the regulations. So I have high confidence, and this is a big task, but 72% of the voters wrote the check, and I think they're very motivated to see the progress delivered. So if something's a barrier that we can remove, come back and tell us what it is, because all of us want to deliver this in a competent but an effective manner. And thank you, and your enthusiasm on the here is just like it was on the video conference we had.
Exactly.
Thank you very much.
Now, I
Thank
do
you,
have
LJ.
a few communication-based slides, just to give you a flavor. I'm not going to spend a lot of time.
One question, Mr.
Oh,
Belushi.
I apologize.
Well, I have a couple comments which I'd like the opportunity to make, but then I'm going to stop my short of asking my question because I think you may
Okay.
really actually address it in the slides you're going to present next. But I just, sometimes when we have conversations like this, I'm always drawn to my thoughts about what is the human impact of the discussion that we're having here. And I have the privilege of representing many of the neighborhoods that are represented here as being part of the projects. And in getting to know more, I lived in the neighborhood in 2016, but in getting to know more people in my role as a council member and what their experiences were when Hurricane Matthew occurred and other times too. It's not this sort of abstract graph, and I know that I'm not suggesting that's what anyone here thinks that it is, but it's a disruption in our lives.
That's right.
It's a destruction of property. It sometimes represents separation of families, impacts on work and family life. It's just tremendously devastating to our community, and I think that's and I think that the human impact is what led to an overwhelming amount of support of voters for the bond referendum, because we wrapped around our community and investing in mitigating
Right.
projects to eliminate this disruption in our lives, and that's really what it's all about.
Yeah.
And so I just don't ever want to lose sight of that, because that's the people I talk to. When they talk about flooding, they're talking about their property, but they're talking about their lives. They're talking about the experiences they had in 2016 and the trauma they live with during storm events and hurricane and otherwise, heavy rainstorm. It's terrible. And I think that really leads to the segue, which I'm hoping you'll answer in your next thing, which is about communication. I'm with Mr. Moss. We absolutely cannot over-communicate this. I went to the ripple effect page, which I'm hoping will be updated in time, or there'll be a new effort. So anyway, I'll stop short of that, but I just want to really emphasize that I think it absolutely needs to be a priority to maintain clear, transparent, and updated communications as to what the progress is. If there's a delay, it should be reflected
Right.
so that people can know. And I think that will help with the human impact
Agreed.
as we go forward. So I
I
thank you.
do also want to emphasize that this is phase one of the program that we're going to get done in 10 years. So we won't be able to address every area that floods in the city with this funding and this program, but we're going to continue it forward. Moving forward, we're going to have other opportunities, but it will definitely transform the city the way it is today from the flooding perspective.
And here's the other thing we know from living here. Neighborhoods are flooding that we never anticipated would experience flooding.
Right.
And that's terrifying, actually. The people in Windsor Woods and other parts of the city can tell you what the human impact is, and we think we're safe in other parts of the city, but actually, increasingly, we're not. And so we've got to keep an eye on this, and that's why I think transparency is key, and I hope that's a segue into the next part of your presentation.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Okay, Mr. Jones, and then Ms. Henley.
Well, first, let me say how pleased I am that you came today, because I think your presentation is probably the clearest one we've had, quite frankly, on what the plans are and how they're going to be implemented, and the progress and the process and the time frame and so forth. And I just think you did an outstanding job of presenting that today. And I just hope that a lot of people were watching out there and will in the future when this meeting is shown on our channel, because it made a much clearer presentation for people to understand what they're really paying for
Right.
with this referendum, and I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Henley.
Following up on both of those comments from Mr. Bellucci and Mr. Jones, with our projects, and we look at these, and for most of them, construction is a few years away. And unfortunately, during the time that these initial things are being done, there's nothing to be seen by the public. And I know we've got our oversight committee planned for the whole thing, but it seems to me that we also need to make sure we are keeping people abreast, and I guess they can be as bundles instead of individual projects, but as bundles, to make sure we're keeping the stakeholders in each area abreast as we're going along. Like, well, now we are designing and this is what we are doing. Because I think if we don't, you know, they're gonna say, well, that was on there, but I don't see anything happening, because it's gonna be a good while before something is going on the ground. And that, this period in between then, I think is extremely important to keep the stakeholders of each project group fully aware of what's happening.
Yep, and that is in this next presentation.
And, you know, you can also get good feedback in that time too. So I think with the communication part of it, and because, you know, if we leave that void, something else is gonna fill it, and this misinformation.
That's right.
And that's the worst thing we can have happen.
Yeah.
And we really need to make sure we're keeping everybody abreast all along the way, because some of these are gonna be several years
That's right.
before there's something.
And it's very complex, so the more we can help educate folks and let them know those complexities, they don't have to know how to solve them, but just know that they're there, and understand why it takes so long, I think will be a better trust builder. But I'm gonna run through these communication slides. And, you know, we all know that successful communication has to start with the research. What do people wanna know? What do people hear? What do people think they hear? What do we want them to hear? So you've already done a lot of that with the ripple effect, and that's why you had so much success with the bond referendum. So as people knew what they were going to get with that money, and they wanted it, so they were willing to pay for it. So there have been a lot of audiences that we've identified, and I want to emphasize that we're talking internal communication with city staff too. You know, we found some barriers that everybody wasn't getting the same information. You know, everybody assumed somebody else knew that, and they didn't know what you were talking about. So we're talking internal communications as well as to external stakeholders. We want everybody to know what we're talking about when we talk about the flood protection program. We want them to know what this project means and what we need from them. So we're working on that also, and some easy reporting. You know, I don't want to give you a big old report every month, well, I probably will, but I want to give you a dashboard that shows you something very simple. Here's where we're at on those projects. But we've identified a lot of stakeholders. We've identified a lot of ways that we're effective with communicating with people, in ways that maybe, you know, weren't as effective and we don't need to spend our time on. So that's one of the things that we were able to do. Now this slide is, I didn't put these slides together, but I am familiar with them because our team has been working with the communications group at the city. So that's why I'm looking down, but I know what they say. But this really kind of shows you our approach for how we're going to keep all the folks aware of what's going on with this program. We're going to continue the things that worked well. And we had, you know, a lot of, your website is amazing. That ripple effect, that video was amazing. The website, I can find anything I want to find about these projects in 3 clicks, which is very unusual for this stage of a program. So we're actually been charged by Mr. Duhaney to come up with even a better fix for just the flood protection program. So if somebody wants to know what's going on in Windsor Woods, they don't have to spend 15 minutes. It makes it easy for them. So we're working on, we also want to be able to educate people on what this program is going to look like after we're done. What's going to be the mitigating effect? Because what if it never rains like that again in those areas and they never get the rain and they're like, well, we just wasted all this money. No, you didn't. It was insurance, it was protection. So we're developing some visuals showing you if you got this level of rain event before this infrastructure and after, what that deferred human impact would have been. So we're actually developing those as part of our messaging that'll be able to go forth as we move forward with this program. Just keep reminding people why we're doing it. Because sometimes if it doesn't rain for a while, people forget. And then if it rains all the time, you know, they remember a little bit better. But so we want to just make sure that we're getting people who are visual learners can see visually, people who want to read reports can read it, people who like photos can see construction photos when we get to that phase. So we're working with all types of media. We're also having some meetings. You know, your engineering group and the stormwater group has meetings with people all the time. You know, they're always meeting with the people when we kick off a project. Here's what we're going to be doing in your neighborhood. It's going to be several years. We're planning it. We're designing it. You're going to see some surveyors out here. And then all the way to, you know, we're getting bids and we're getting ready to break ground in this area. So we're going to continue those one-on-one, face-to-face neighborhood meetings as we move forward through this program. That's going to be something that we don't stop doing. We're also...
If it's okay, Mr. Rouse has it.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike, I definitely can wait till you get finished with your segment. But it's a reminder to council, but I'd like to let you finish your communications
Okay.
briefing.
All right. Won't be long. Won't be long. We also want to work with the media. Every time I come here, I watch the news every time before I watch the news every time. So sometimes I come the next day, I come to meetings like, what about this? What about this? But one thing, they actually got what the referendum was about. They actually communicated it effectively. I was like, wow, that's exactly what we're doing. You don't always see that. So having those partnerships with the media is really going to help with the messaging and making sure everybody understands that transparency and where we're at and how we're continuing to move forward, even when hiccups happen. Like you said, they just want to know what it is. And then the internal, there's a whole bunch of folks involved in this sausage making of this flood protection program. People from different departments, people who are more engaged than others. And we want everyone to have the same message, the same elevator speech, so that if somebody in their neighborhood talks to them about it, we're all on the same page. We all understand what we're doing. We're all here working together. So we want some broad messages that would come from like the city manager's level, LJ's level to his team. And we also want some, the supervisors to be able to talk effectively about this. So we want people to feel part of it. When somebody feels like they're part of it, they own it a little bit more. They might tell other people about it, their next door neighbor or the grocery store, in line at the grocery store, or whoever you're at. When it's raining, when you got to go to your car, So we want to make sure everybody's kind of in line and aware of what's going on. And if you're in real estate, we want you to know we're going to be coming at you with 300 easements next month. If you're in budget, we want you to know, okay, we're ready for that next bond issuance. So we want everyone to kind of be in sync early on and throughout the program so that we're really getting targeted communications, but we're also getting that high level message out to everybody and then zero it in on the specific folks that need to hear it. And then you asked about the Oversight Board. We have not forgot about them. At the very back of this report, this white paper I gave you, is some suggested language on how that board might want to convene. If you look at the very last chapter of the white paper, I gave you a review of about 9 other similar oversight boards throughout the country. Some of them are stormwater, some of them are water, wastewater, but kind of this general same industry. And I reviewed them all, and I gave you a table, and I compared them to how often do they meet, what are their roles and responsibilities, who's on these boards, who decides who's on these boards. And then at the very back, we gave you some suggested language for a charter. This is just for you to look at and to think about, just to get you a starting point, so you didn't have to start with a blank page. We gave you some, a sample of what your oversight board might look like. So the sooner you get that oversight board worked out, the sooner we'll be reporting out to them. So, but the plan is, we'd report to that oversight board more frequently than we would report to council. I think in your resolution that you had said we'd report to the oversight board monthly and then to council bi-monthly. So I think once we get moving forward, all of that will get worked out as far as the frequency. Because I'm hoping a lot of the materials that we're going to be producing and put on the website is really going to be answering the mail, and you don't necessarily have to have a meeting to get your questions answered. So I believe that's my last slide. So